Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our monthly Fearless Friday event. I'm Susanna DeBaca, the president and group publisher of Business Publications Corporation, which is the parent company of the Business Record. We are absolutely delighted that you can be here with us today. I know that some of you have joined us before, but we also know there's a lot of new faces here today, so we're very happy to have you here. This month's topic is mentoring. Today, we're going to talk about the value of mentoring, and we're going to offer tips on how to actually find and work with a mentor. Like almost all of our themes, I think I say this every time, this topic is just absolutely near and dear to my heart. I have benefited greatly from some people who served as role models informally and as formal mentors and sounding boards. You don't know them necessarily, but these people made a huge difference in my life. I think back to my college days at Iowa State, and Peg Lonnquist, who was the head of the Margaret Sluss Women's Center, was a mentor to me. C.A. Rundell, a guy from Texas, encouraged me to get my MBA and sort of shepherded me through that process. Heidi Steiger, one of my first bosses on Wall Street, showed me the ropes of how to be a woman in finance. And then I have the opportunity to work with Connie Weimer on a daily basis. And I learn and grow from having the association with these people, probably more than they even realize. I have also attempted to be that listening ear and sounding board for other people, which is a growing experience and so rewarding when I see these other folks blossoming because of something I've potentially said or helped them to discover in themselves. So, mentoring can be powerful, but it's really a relatively new concept. Why might we even want a mentor? So, I have a question for you to get us started this morning. Who are some of your mentors? Chat their names or their roles just so we can hear a little bit from you about people who touched you, whether we know them or not. While you do that, let me tell you a little bit more. Today, we're going to hear from some amazing women who are going to answer questions about the importance of mentoring and help facilitate discussion in breakout rooms. I know you're really going to enjoy hearing from them. But before we meet them and hear from our fearless editor, Emily Barsky and Blowbaum, I am absolutely delighted to have the chance to introduce and thank our sponsor, Women Lead Change, and especially Tiffany O'Donnell, who is the organization's CEO. I've got to say, who knows more about empowering women and mentorship than Tiffany? She has been a leader in Iowa for more than 20 years, 15 years of which were telling the stories of Cedar Rapids and Iowa as a trusted Emmy award-winning TV news anchor. She helped launch Cedar Rapids NewBoCo, which you have probably all heard about. She has been involved in countless nonprofit and civic activities. But since becoming the CEO of Women Lead Change, she has dramatically expanded this organization, which is focused on workforce development through a gender lens and is dedicated to advancing women leaders at all levels. She's really made it into a premier women's leadership development organization, and she's nationally recognized as a thought leader. So welcome and thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you. We should all have that kind of an introduction to start our days off today. Excuse me, as well as the sun shining on me like it is today. I hope it's not too bright that you need sunglasses to see me here. Women Lead Change is so proud to be sponsoring today's session on mentorship. And I'm going to take this opportunity, since I have the microphone, to thank a woman who was a mentor who became a sponsor and is ultimately the reason I'm sitting in this chair today. And that's Diane Ramsey. She was my predecessor and a co-founder of Women Lead Change. And I'll just share with you one thing that she said to me that I'm convinced over time, and I've been here 6 years now, I'm convinced is why I managed to take the leap and why I believe our organization and our team has been so successful. She said to me at one point during those beginning days when I was pretty doubtful about my abilities because I'd never done it before, right? She said, "Tiffany, I won't let you fail." I won't let you fail. Now, whether or not she really meant that or she believed she could do that, she said that to me. And I share that with you because, to your point, Susanna, you never know what you're going to say or how you're going to impact somebody's future. And she certainly changed the trajectory of my life. We know that over the past 18 months that women have been disproportionately leaving the workforce at all levels. Since we know that women are more likely to mentor and sponsor other women, if these leaders have had to leave the workforce, of course, women at all levels could lose some of their most powerful allies and champions. And in a world that's turned virtual, visibility for opportunities for advancement might also have a negative effect on women in the workplace. The best companies have seen the positive outcomes of gender equity across all levels and are taking steps to bring women back into the workforce and quickly. This also means that those of us in today's session have an even more critical and powerful role in advocating for our peers. We are going to have to be intentional about our own development and the development of our teams. In fact, we need to work to speed up onboarding so that women who've had to leave don't miss a beat upon return. Our upcoming Women Lead Change Leadership Conference in Des Moines on October 27th to 28th is going to be an awesome opportunity to bring your teams back together in person or virtually for tactical professional development. And the speakers at our conference this year and every year are selected to educate, challenge, and inspire. And the topics range from disrupting gender bias to leading with empathy, among many others. You've taken a great step in joining today's session, and I'm sure you're going to leave this morning with some great advice from some incredible people to put into practice. Be intentional about your development, and we certainly hope to see you next month at the Women Lead Change Conference at the Iowa Events Center. Have fun, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. You know, one of my mentors told me one time, you really truly are in charge of your destiny, and it's your job to reach out to others to have them help you. And that always really stuck with me. I not to just wait for somebody to promote you or advance you, but take control. And I think today, in trying to figure out how we actually steer our own mentorship course, that will be incredible advice. So thank you again. Now, speaking of leadership and fearlessness, I'm very pleased now to be able to introduce Emily Barsky, who is the editor of the Business Record. Emily was absolutely instrumental in helping us develop Fearless almost a year ago. It's really, really hard to believe that. And she has done an amazing job of leading the way in terms of developing really compelling content and helping to create these events that really bring us together. Along with Emily Blowbaum, who is our fearless editor, the best title ever, they are producing award-winning content to help you succeed in work and life. So Emily Barsky is going to give us an overview of today's program. Welcome, Emily.
Great. Thank you, Susanna, and good morning, everyone. We're so happy that you joined us this morning. Just a few quick technology tips. If for some reason you lose your connection or Zoom shuts down, you can simply return to the event through the same link that you used to get in. And if you have any questions about technology or about the program as we go about this morning, please feel free to drop those in the chat at any time, and our staff can address them. As Susanna mentioned, we launched Fearless about a year ago in November, and we had a simple goal to empower Iowa women to succeed in work and life. It's our belief that women's issues are everyone's issues, and we want to welcome anyone into our conversations. We also believe that connecting our Fearless audience is really key to this. And our hope is that as you read the newsletter each week, that you'll find something that's of particular interest to you, or some in-depth content that helps you learn something new or understand a different perspective about these issues. And as we offer the opportunity to connect, we want to talk about these issues together. So through Fearless, we always want to include discussion of some timely topics, but we also wanted to have some focus areas on many of the issues that affect women. So we've had a monthly theme that folks told us were most important to them as we did surveys leading up to the launch of Fearless. So this topic has been on mentorship and professional development. And this was one of the topics that our audience members told us that they were most excited about and wanted to hear and talk about the most. And as we were putting together this morning's program, we thought, who else could tell us more about mentorship than our Women of Influence honorees? So we invited the 2021 honorees and are glad to have 7 of them with us here this morning. So here's how this morning will work. We're going to have two panels to split up our Women of Influence honorees so that we can hear from them all. And in between those panels, you'll get to hear a little bit about the kinds of content that we've been working on in Fearless. After our second panel, we'll head to small breakout rooms so you can hear a story from one of the Women of Influence, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions or take part in the discussion. And you'll, of course, want to stick around to the very end because we'll do a drawing for a Fearless prize. Before we get into our panels, we have a special video to show you. At our event that honored this year's Women of Influence, we asked them some questions about fearlessness. So let's see that now.
To me, fearlessness means being bold and really owning your space.
Fearless means doing it anyway, even if you have to do it alone.
Yeah, what it means to me to be fearless, I guess, is just being able to jump into situations and, maybe not have all the answers that you need up front, but be able to jump into them and understand that, you're going to figure it out as you go.
For me, being fearless means that I show up in my true self every day. The good, the bad, the ugly, but owning who I am and standing in that.
To be fearless is not to have limits. And I learned that while I was growing up because I had a woman in my life, my mother, that made me believe that I could do anything I wanted. And I think it's very important that we pass it on that message of fearless is go for it. There are no limits.
I think fearless for me actually comes with a little bit of fear, but also comes with a huge amount of conviction and passion and energy.
You just have to go for it. And if you fall down, you just get up because the world's not going to come to an end. And really, I think you learn more from your failures than you do your successes very often. And we put too many boundaries up for ourselves. So just say you got to go for it. Screw your courage to the sticking point, as Lady Macbeth would say.
Don't wait to be invited. Take your place. Find those mentors and the people that believe in you. And when people tell you you can't do that or can't do something, use that as a motivator to prove them wrong.
Believe in yourself. You can do anything. We're all here to support you. The world believes in you. Find people that lift you up. Find people that believe in you because you're worth it.
Thank you to our honorees for sharing what it means to be fearless. I don't know about all of you, but I think I might just play that video for myself every morning to get up and going. So as I said, 7 of our honorees are with us this morning, and they are Emily Abbas, SVP, Chief Consumer Banking and Marketing Officer at Bankers Trust, Rosalind Fox, Factory Manager, John Deere Des Moines Works, Suzanne Minnick, President and CEO, Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, Tiffany Tauschek, Chief Operations Officer at the Greater Des Moines Partnership, Sonia Parras Conrad, Founder, Co-Chair, and Attorney at Sonia Parras Law Office, Marta Codina, Region Bank President at Wells Fargo, and Janice Lane Schroeder, CEO of Children and Families of Iowa. So our first panel will have Rosalind Fox, Emily Abbas, Suzanne Minnick, and Marta Codina. So good morning to all of you. Our first question for you this morning is, how have you benefited from mentorship? And Roz, we'll start with you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Emily and the Business Record, for having me again today. This is one of these topics that are near and dear to my heart, because I really, truly believe that I wouldn't be or haven't achieved the level of success that I have had it not been the mentors that I've crossed paths with over the years. And so in terms of how mentors have helped me, it's been a number of ways. So as I was introduced, you learned that I'm the factory manager here at John Deere, and you typically don't see women in manufacturing and leading a factory. But I will share with you a woman named Linda Cash. She was probably my first sort of unofficial mentor. And she was leading a factory working in the auto industry. I was working in the auto industry at that time, and just really took me under her wing and taught me how to be a female leader in a manufacturing environment that's dominated by men, right? I mean, literally she bossed. She was the boss, and she did it so well with so much class and so much knowledge and acumen. And she was one of those leaders that everybody wanted to work for. And so that began my mentoring relationship, and it's helped me because she challenged me to show up more confidently, to use my voice more loudly in meetings, and to just think more aspirationally about what I could do in manufacturing and in my career. And, I just, sometimes you just don't think about how far you can go because you're just trying to get through the day, right? But she was really one of those people who really just every day, what are you doing better? How are you improving? How are you thinking about the future? What did you do better today than yesterday? She was constantly sort of pushing and challenging me. And at some points I was just like, really, can I just come to work and just do my job? And she was like, no, right? And so mentors, good mentors will help challenge you. And that's what she did for me. She helped answer questions that, and she didn't give me the answers. She gave me more questions to help me get to the right answer, right? And that's what mentors really do. They help you think through things and solve things and give you the confidence to reach higher and achieve greater aspirations. So yeah, that's my story. I reference her when I talk about mentors. She is the first, and being that she was a Black woman like me in operations, I will always hold her in the highest regard for helping getting me set off on the right track.
Thank you. And I love that about answering questions with questions to help people get started. Emily, what about you?
It's fun to be surrounded by so many wonderful Emilys this morning. Thanks for having me. I think variety is said to be the spice of life, and variety in this case has been what has provided the greatest benefit in my mentor style relationships. I've been fortunate to have a combination of both men and women throughout my career who have served as advisors and resources. Some were my direct supervisors, some were CEOs at the companies I worked for. I actually didn't have a formal mentor until I made the ask of Nora Everett, who's retired from Principal just a few years ago. I reached out to her because I knew my job was growing, and I knew she would have wonderful advice and experiences to draw upon as I began to lead larger teams and P&Ls. I'd also be remiss if I didn't do a shout out to my mom, who I see is on surprising me this morning. Give a wave. She talked about fearless. She was one of the only women in her law school class in the 70s, one of the only single parents with a professional job in the 80s, and one of the first female judges in Polk County in the 90s. So talk about fearless and someone who's made a big impact on my life. So whether it happens organically or with some help, I just think everyone deserves to have people they can count on and people who are invested in their success, people you can be real with, people you can ask advice from, people who'll step in and tell you when they see things that you aren't doing well or that you can improve, but also people that can quietly celebrate with you when you've achieved something especially difficult. So variety, it's not just about one person, but many people in our lives and in our careers, and they step up and help us when we need them most.
Thank you. And hello to Emily's mom. Suzanne, how about you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And the benefit of working from home is someone just knocked at my door and my dog's barking. So hopefully you don't hear that. So I actually am going to pivot a little bit because based on what the other two have already said, I think of my first mentors for sure being my parents. And there's one of my favorite authors is Parker Palmer, and he has a book called Let Your Life Speak. And I suppose that's where it started with my, especially, my mother, like what is it that you're living and how does that show up for others and teach and guide? And my father, I would have been fourth generation in a limestone mining company. And that door was wide open. Like there were no women in that industry, but my father was invited me in and wanted me to learn every part of that business, including learning how to drive a loader in a giant quarry. I mean, like no limits. You dream it, you do it, make it happen. And so I guess I hadn't thought about starting there, but I need to start there. They definitely provided that doors wide open grounding for me. And then I think about my first boss, formal boss, Jerry Johnston Allen. I don't know if any of you will remember. She ran the American Cancer Society here, and she gave me my first job fresh out of college. I had no experience, none, doing what it is she hired me to do, but she saw the potential. And I think as mentors, or at least I hope as a mentor, that's where I spend my energy, is seeing the potential in others and helping them envision what it is they want to accomplish. Some of the greatest mentors for me along the journey bluntly have held up mirrors and challenged me to ask myself, what is it that I truly value? And how much am I owning that? And is what I'm doing reflective of those values or not? And whether it's been those who sit, as Emily mentioned, the variety pack of, whether it's been my peers, those sitting in a boardroom, my children, serving as some of the greatest guides and mentors. I think those who have invited me in their most vulnerable moments too. We learn the most when we have the privilege of walking alongside, and so some of my greatest mentoring moments have been when others have been very vulnerable in their own discoveries, in their own trips and falls, and how they've gotten back up. So, and then I would just say I've probably learned as much from those who've never met me. And I've just had the privilege to witness, I guess, circle back to Let Your Life Speak. I've had the privilege to witness them in this community and in the broader community, and how it is that they've shown up for themselves, and to Roz's point, to be 1,000% reflective of only themselves, and unafraid to show up as themselves. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. And Marta.
Good morning, everyone, and hello to my Women of Influence friends. Boy, what can I say that hasn't already been said? I have a little bit of what Roz, Suzanne, and Emily all said, going back to just the people that influence your life. So Suzanne, I do have to acknowledge, parents, and Emily, your mom, and all the things that make you who you are. I'm going to share, when I started in the finance industry or banking industry 40 plus years ago, there were no women really in leadership. There were some that managed, frontline, which I was very frontline at that time. So there were supervisors, but really not what I would consider leaders. And actually at that time, probably it influenced me a lot, because I also saw women that rose to leadership positions or management positions. And I'll go back to the 80s, right? So were typically ones that had to claw and scratch to, get to that glass ceiling. And they felt like they had to treat other women, or, make other women pay as much as they did, right? And kind of impose those struggles sometimes. And one thing I've learned over the years is we've got to lift each other up, not hold each other back. And even though, again, I cared for those women way back, they influenced me in a way they didn't realize, because I did not want to have to treat other women like maybe I saw them treating women back then. So I've really been very purposeful throughout my career to lift other women up. And I also have had some very strong influencers, mentors, sponsors that are male. And I think it's incumbent on us to help teach and influence our male friends, counterparts, leaders on what makes us tick, and really understanding some of the gender bias issues that have occurred. One of my biggest, and I'm going to call him a sponsor, not a mentor, was Len Horak, who's very well known in the Des Moines community, bringing me into Wells Fargo many years ago. I was at a pivotal point in my life where I was an executive leader at another institution. I had just had my son at an older age, which, by the way, he turned 21 yesterday. Crazy. But I remember I came into the organization thinking, boy, I don't know if I want to, I think I want to just stay, just kind of stay where I'm at for a while and not manage people and not get back into it, because I felt like I needed to focus on just my son. And Lynn was so inviting and so empathetic to, you know what, you can do both and I'm going to help you. So as a sponsor, he truly advocated for me. I mean, he was that person that really helped me build my career vision. And I would say the difference with him is he was very personally vested in my development. He opened doors. He brought me to the table. He didn't tell me what to say, but he certainly influenced how I manage. I've been told throughout my career, you're too emotional. Well, yeah, I'm Latina. Okay, I am emotional, but how do I channel that rather than, squash it in me? And he really helped me. He just gave me the confidence that I needed to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And I heard, I think Susanna maybe mentioned it in the beginning, I won't let you fail. That's really the theme, I think, for me with Lynn and other influencers and mentors that I've had, that they gave me the confidence and that safety net, right? To, just say, you can do it, and I'm going to be here to help you along the way. So believing in me and, lifting me up along the way. And I think that's what, again, is my obligation now to pay that forward. So there you go, Emily.
Great, thank you. Roz, could you talk a little bit about how you go about mentoring others?
Yeah, of course. So let me start off by saying I never turn anybody away, because when somebody approaches you for mentorship, it takes some confidence to do that. And so I always say yes. Now, sometimes I feel like that's half of my job, spend mentoring others, which is okay though. I think as leaders, that is part of our job responsibility, to grow that next generation and to pay it forward as well. But, in terms of how I mentor others, it's really dependent on what the mentee needs, right? And so sometimes it's regularly scheduled touch points. And sometimes it's, when they are working with a special situation or got a special project that they need some guidance and input on, and then it's just sort of hit or miss based upon their personal needs. But I really let the mentee determine how they like to be mentored rather than me forcing a standardized process on them. And so, and I think the other important thing about how I've mentored others is that I always tell them I'm happy to do it, but this will not be forever, right? Because sometimes you need to get my perspective, and then you should also work on developing relationships and having mentoring relationships with others, right? So that you can get that various perspective and opinions and thought process as well. And so I always establish that as a handshake up front. We're not going to do this for 5 years, just a limited amount of time. And what that does is, again, allows them to go off and do something different, but it also gives you room on your plate to pick up other folks who may be interested as well. So, and I tend to handle my mentoring relationships based upon what their need. Again, no formal structure. I let them set the agenda. I think starting off, I tell them, well, I need this from you up front, in just terms of how to get to know you, and then, tell me about some of the challenges that you're working through. But then other than that, I ask a mentee to tell me or to bring the topics to the conversation in which they want to discuss or be challenged on. So that's kind of how I work through mine.
Great. And Suzanne, could you talk a little bit about some tips for those who are maybe seeking a mentor and where they could get started and who to look for?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think find circles of trust, and so go to people that you think are either in spaces that you want to be in or have guidance that is relevant to the type of mentoring that you're seeking out, to Raz's point. I think that it's very dependent then on who you who you seek out, and to not hold back. You know, if there's someone you want to learn from, pick up the phone. That's the wonderful thing about this community. And we say it a lot, but it actually is very true. If you pick up the phone and reach out to someone, you've got a pretty high chance they're going to return that call. And if not, then you maybe want a different mentor anyway. So don't hesitate to pick up the phone and reach out. People welcome that, and will learn as much from you as you possibly could seek to learn from them.
Thank you. Emily, you mentioned that you've had both mentors who have been women and men, and I'm just curious, in particular, for those male allies out there, how can they be good mentors to women? What can they do to be supportive?
I was really lucky, even very early in my career, to work for male CEOs who believed in a 20-something-year-old that was just willing to step up and give advice and have a seat at the table and earn to keep that seat. And so I think just believing in someone, asking them for their opinion, not taking age, gender, or anything else into consideration, and just knowing that everyone's voice is important, and having input from a diverse group always makes a company better, a project better, any organization better.
Great, thank you. And Marta, could you answer that same question on how men can particularly be allies and mentors to women?
Sure. I've had a lot of, again, male mentors, sponsors along the way. And again, that whole belief factor, I think, is really important. And I'm sure that Tiffany and Women Lead Change have extensive research as well on, women tend to, and I wouldn't say lack confidence, but let's just use the example of when we're looking at a job posting or an opportunity. Typically, if we see like 15 qualifications or 15 needed qualifications, if we don't meet all 15, we're not going to jump in. We tend to go, oh, I'm not qualified if I don't meet every one of those. Our male counterparts tend to go, oh, that job sounds great. Sure, I can do it, and jump in. So sometimes, we hold ourselves back because of just the way we're wired, and, we're wired differently. And I think helping some of my, male counterparts and male mentors that I've had, understand that's how we're wired, and help me overcome, some of that fear, if you will, or lack of confidence that, I may only meet, 7 of the 10 or, 6 of the 12 or whatever, but here's how I can, overcome some of those other, needed qualifications. So that's just something very tangible that I know I've talked through with men, and I've told them up front, hey, and if somebody, because early in my career, if someone didn't ask me to go and look at a different role or push me, I wouldn't do it. And now I'm, I've been at a very different point in my life, and I understand women need that push sometimes to, really understand how can I mitigate maybe some of these other qualifications. So, I also think just the empathy and the emotional aspect too of our role, be our authentic self, not try to, button up and be male, right? Early on in my career, we had to wear ties, we had to wear suits. I mean, I haven't worn a blazer in a couple of years, and that's okay. But women had to wear complete suits back then, and you had to look like a guy or, act like a guy. That's not the case today. We need to own it, and we need to be ourselves and understand the power that we bring to the table in our different thought process.
That's great input, and thank you to all 4 of you. Now we're going to move on to our second panel here in a little bit, but before we do that, I want to kick things over to Emily Blobaum. Emily is the engine behind our coverage on women's and gender issues. As the Fearless editor, she puts together the e-newsletter each week, providing original in-depth reporting. And we'd love for you to connect with her if you haven't already. She's going to tell us a little bit about what she's been working on lately. Emily?
Thank you, Emily, and hello, everyone. Good morning. It's been a while since we've had a virtual Fearless Friday event. And if you're new to this event, usually I take this time to walk through and talk about some of the stories that we've covered and published in Fearless throughout the last month or so. But this time, I'm going to briefly go over some of the 6 big pieces that we've published since July, and then I'll talk about a little bit of what's to come in the coming months. So as many of you know already, Connie Weimer is a tremendous resource and advocate for young women in Iowa. She's quite honestly the reason that I'm here today covering women's and gender issues at a business publication. I sat down with her one afternoon earlier this summer, and we talked about some of the big risks that she's taken throughout her life and what she's learned along the way. She graciously shared 10 life tips that she often shares with other people, and those are included in the link that I think Chris just dropped in the chat. And I encourage you to read them and then write them down and tape them to your wall or cubicle where you can see them every day. I also talked with Chelsea Miller Bailey, who is the Assistant Director of the Center for LGBTQIA Student Success at Iowa State University. Throughout several conversations with her over Mexican food and then walking through the Sculpture Park downtown, we talked about what it means to her to be a young professional, and then how she prioritizes her own well-being at work. And we'll drop the link to that story in the chat as well. And then earlier this month, Emily Barsky and I toured Dorothy's House's brand new recovery home here in Des Moines. If you're not familiar with the organization, Dorothy's House provides a safe place and programming for survivors of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And we've got lots of photos in that story as well. And then many of you already probably know, and maybe some of you have received the expanded child tax credit, but we knew that the government's expansion of the child tax credit was a big deal for families, not just in the US, but in Iowa as well. Some predictions show that Iowa could see a 40% drop in child poverty with the credit. So we talked with several nonprofit leaders throughout the state about what the credit would mean for especially middle and low income households. And then we spoke with one family who benefited. Then Emily Barsky hosted a conversation via Zoom with Lanisha Castle, who is the executive director of the African American Museum of Iowa. They talked about confidence and how people can build the worth they see them in themselves. And you can watch the full recording on our website. And then lastly, we spoke with Max Mowitz, who helped launch a brand new mutual aid organization that focuses on providing funding to trans and non-binary individuals seeking gender-affirming care. So quite a lot that we covered in quite the range of stories. So a big part of what we do at Fearless is take big issues that affect people every day, and they might not necessarily be newsworthy at any given moment, but we really try and bring them into the limelight. And making news out of something that is not new can be really hard. So we greatly appreciate and welcome story ideas and news tips. So in the coming months, we'll be covering issues of financial empowerment and pay equity, business ownership and childcare. And so if you know of any great people to talk to, or know of businesses or organizations doing something new and interesting in any of these fields, definitely please reach out our way. And lastly, we're currently working on our annual Fearless issue of the Business Record, which tends to be one of the biggest print editions of the year. For reference, the inaugural issue last year was 86 pages long. We shared stories of 12 women, some of whom included single mothers and domestic violence survivors, immigrants and civic leaders. And we're doing something similar this year. But this time around, we also want to include you in the issue. So if you follow the link in the chat to the Jot form, I think we'll drop it in here soon. You'll be prompted to share a time that you were fearless, and then you'll have the chance to be featured in the issue, which comes out in November. So with that, I'll turn it back to Emily.
All right. Thank you, Emily. And Chris just dropped that link in the chat to the forum, and I would really encourage you all to check it out and share a fearless moment with us. It's always interesting when we ask people the same exact question, how different the answers that we get back are. And it's always exciting to share your stories with our audience. So I'd really encourage you to check that out. Now we'll get into our second panel. We have Tiffany Tauschek, Sonia Parras-Conrad, and Janice Lane Schroeder, who will be talking with us this time. So I'm going to kick it off with the same question we asked the first panel. How have you all benefited from mentorship? And we'll start with Tiffany.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for taking time on a Friday morning for this important conversation. And I just want to, first of all, echo the comments of the women that have already shared. I think there's great nuggets of information and advice, and there are lots of good reminders in there too. So thank you very much for sharing. And I really believe that a great mentor not only is listening, but is asking great questions. And a great mentor is going to be someone who stretches you and helps you think beyond what you thought you were capable of, but also helps you reframe things at times and is willing to be very candid and provide feedback that's not only about successes, helping you celebrate the successes, but it's always willing to also be candid with you and in ways that maybe sometimes even hurts a little bit at first, but it comes from a very good place of wanting to help you. I also have been fortunate to have leaders of many different demographics, backgrounds, who have served as mentors, and none of them have I asked, hey, will you be my mentor? It's in many times in ways it's individuals that I have heard about or read about or found on LinkedIn that I've just been inspired by. And there are some even just watching on television that I'm listening and then reading more about them and learning more about them. And I think that's important too, for us to remember that it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's older than you or someone who you have that accessibility with in our community. I will, however, say that one of the best things about our community is that our leaders are so accessible. And the other women have already made reference to this, but we will all help each other out. And I know, I suspect everyone on this call would do the same, that if you were called and asked for help, you would make the time to do that. And that is part of what makes our community so special. So one quick story that I will share with you, and this is sharing a mentor who I admired from afar for years as a young professional. And several years ago, I finally made time to sit down with this woman one-on-one and ask her some questions and just for advice. And that woman is Connie Weimer, who, again, very accessible, but I, as a young professional in my early 20s, was just so intimidated. And that was my problem, right? Not hers, because we all know how approachable and wonderful she is. But I finally, when I did have the courage to reach out to her and sit down with her and share with her my career aspirations, one of the things I appreciated most about Connie in that conversation, which has been one of those conversations I will always remember, is that as I shared that someday my hope is to lead an organization, and someday I want to help represent women and lift up other women so that they understand that they have that in them too. And one of the things she shared with me is she went down the list. I won't share the list with you. I could, though, because I still have it memorized. She ticked down the list of all of the traits and things and skills about me that do not align with the typical understanding or typical CEO sort of resume. And she said, Tiffany, this is going to be really tough. And I just thought, oh my gosh, yeah, I can't do that. But then she said, but you are tougher. And it was one of those moments that, again, she acknowledged that I don't have to act like a man, Marta, to your point earlier. You don't have to be who you are not. You can be who you are, and you can find success in who you are. And sometimes that's going to be really challenging, and you need to lean into that challenge. And again, I think we're so fortunate in our community that we have so many individuals that are willing to help us on that journey and support us along the way. But that is one story. I have many others, but that was one I wanted to share today. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Tiffany. That sounds exactly like what Connie would say. So thanks for that story. Sonia, how about you? How have you benefited from mentorship?
Oh, tremendously. But before I start, again, thank you so much for the opportunity, the panelists. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to, connect and to rethink and to listen and to still learn and write down tips from my colleagues and panelists. But I wanna just share a little story, just a fact, that was a recurring theme in my life as a lawyer. So imagine, I arrived 26 years ago into Des Moines, Iowa. There were very, I'm gonna say very few women immigrant lawyers with accents. So I will step into the courtroom, and the first thing that I was asked is, are you the interpreter? Well, no, I'm not the interpreter. And are you, I often represented survivors of domestic violence that were immigrants. And here I was with my suit and my heels, right? Like playing the part with my lawyer costume. And they were asking me, well, are you the survivor? Are you, here for a protective order? So I got to be tough, I got to say, I can care less, and I'm gonna pull through this. So I wasn't self-made. I came in and I had so many women that said, and so what? When I was embarrassed or I was like doubting myself, here I was with my client about to change her life and getting a protective order. And I was challenged by my male peers, mainly with whether I was the interpreter, right? And I still do interpret as much as they needed to, but I was there in a different role. So I share this with you because I could have just hide and self-doubt and not succeed. I had odds that were against my success, but yet so many women around me supported me. And one of the things that I learned from all of them is, to be challenged. They challenged me to think on my own without limits. And that, when we would get together and work on public policy and work on potential remedies for systemic changes, my opinion was never wrong. Maybe it wasn't taken. Maybe my point wasn't taken, but they always encouraged me to speak up, to take risks. They answered questions with more questions. That was like so important, because they were not giving me the answers and the solutions. They were saying, well, what do you think? And how would you, from your own perspective, take on this? So that gave me a lot of confidence to be a team member, not to feel rejected, to endure, and to pull through and never hear no. And the other thing that they helped me a lot with is to understand that the disruption of gender bias and that disruption of gender violence is present, and that unfortunately, maybe I wasn't going to see the end of it in my generation. But from early on, what could I do, and how could I, in a sense, mentor others as I was being mentored, to work against gender violence and to disrupt gender bias. Setting boundaries. I am a energetic, person, so I can work 24 hours without coffee, Give me coffee, you'll see, so to balance more than my life, which I like the way I balance my life, is to balance and respect their version of balance, right? And learn when to like stop. It's midnight, do not send me more emails, right? So that's what they taught me, respect my balance. And just because I choose this, it doesn't mean that I'm, a worse worker or a different worker or, lazy or, So that was also an important lesson. And the third piece is the why not, obviously women are better together. And when we tell each other, well, why not? And how do you get there? We accomplish, revolutions in organizing and changing things that need to be changed. So I just want to say to Emily's mom, Judge Artis Reyes, thank you, because I will step in your courtroom, and I saw you in there. And although I wish you would be my mentor, I never asked. Number one, I should have. But number two, just seeing the role model of a woman taking control of the courtroom, that was so empowering for me as a young lawyer. So thank you.
Thank you. I love that story. Janice, what about you?
Again, I just echo some of the things that I've heard from my fellow women of influence honorees. And I just have to say that this has been very invigorating for me today. So it's been a rough week, and now I'm just energized to kind of go into the weekend. But I have to say, I have been very fortunate and blessed to have had the best mentors. And one of the key mentors that I had in my life was Catherine G. Williams, and she was a woman of influence honoree, either 2018 or 2019. So just to give you a little bit of background about Miss Catherine Williams, who we affectionately call Miss Catherine. In 1979, she became the first African American in state government and one of the highest ranking African Americans in social services nationally when she was appointed as the interim director of the Iowa Department of Human Services. So she was a powerhouse. And as it relates to children and families, and that's what I'm passionate about. She kept me grounded and focused. And I think what I really liked is that she challenged me to go above and beyond. Always supportive, but could be very honest with her feedback. So because of her wisdom and her experience to give back to other women, to work with young girls and to work specifically with women of color, and watching her do this work and looking at the impact, I continue to work in the field of health and human services and really try to advocate for change. I believe she was instrumental in making me a stronger woman and having those authentic conversations and sometimes courageous conversations about, okay, does this work and why doesn't it work? And then challenging some of my decisions and just sitting there in her home. And she would ask, why are you doing that? You need to get back to the core, get back to the fundamentals, and then pushing me forward. And always saying things like, Jan, you got to think bigger with this. Think about the entire family. Don't be afraid. Be courageous. Be fearless in that. So I think about being resilient. And I think Miss Catherine was very resilient. As an African-American female in human services, there's always rule changes. There's regulations. There's things that we want to do, but there's no money to do it, to help the families that we serve. So Miss Catherine was able to help me kind of refine my tools and my skill set, and then help me navigate through like obstacles so that I could kind of reassess what was happening. And then when I needed to kind of rebound. The other piece that I think was helpful to me was that I needed to make connections. And as a person that did not live in the state of Iowa. I was not born and bred in the state of Iowa, but coming here, it was a difficult transition at times. But she was able to help me make those needed connections to individuals that were key in moving the work forward. And that helped me leaps and bounds. So mentorship for me was definitely a benefit in shaping who I am today. So I am grateful to my mentors, and I highlight Miss Catherine, who lived an awesome life, and she died at the age of 105 last year. So, right, the richness of that and the fact that I was able to have a part of that, just a small piece of that, I am forever grateful.
Wow, 105. That is
105,
awesome.
yes.
That is awesome. Tiffany, could you talk a little bit about how we can support others in their own mentorship and professional development journeys?
You bet. Well, I certainly am a believer in, once you do have a relationship, an established relationship with a mentor or mentors, to keep in touch with them and ensure that this really is a two-way street, because I guarantee you, as a mentor, you're getting sometimes just as much, if not more, out of that relationship than probably the mentee. At least that's been my experience. So for those that are mentors of mine, again, I have not asked an individual to serve as a mentor, but I view some individuals in that way. And I just make a real effort to make sure I'm keeping in touch with them. If they're in the media or interviewed, or their organization won an award, sending them a note, just making sure that they know that I'm acknowledging their successes just as much as they've been acknowledging my successes. But lifting up others, and again, this has been said over and over again today, just how critically important that is. Because when we do step up and when we do lean in, we can have a stronger impact. And just as many have helped lift up each of us in different ways, it is our responsibility and it is our duty to do the same for others. I'll share one other quick thing here. I had the last flight in from Washington, D.C. last night to get back home after meeting with each of our congressmen and congresswomen the last couple of days. And on the flight back, I was listening to a Glennon Doyle podcast. Adam Grant was interviewing her, and I would highly recommend this podcast. And then also Brene Brown podcast if you're looking for inspiration. But Glennon was talking about, yes, her book Untamed, which hopefully many of you have read, if not, highly recommend it. But she was talking about how so many times others put parameters around us or boundaries around us or define us in a certain way, whether it's because of how we look or what people may perceive as our background or our experience or whatever it could be. But she was also sharing just how we do that to ourselves as well. We put our own boundaries around ourselves, and we also define ourselves sometimes in certain categories. And she was really challenging the listeners, which really spoke to me, to not just say, for example, I am a COO, but to say I am, period. And that is good enough. And that is enough. And again, just wanted to share that. Janice, to your point of feeling invigorated and inspired by the wonderful women that have shared stories today, that's when I think we can remind ourselves over and over again too, that we are enough. Thanks.
Maybe that's our assignment for each of us after this, to do a little power posing in the mirror and say, I am. I love that. Sonia, you've touched on this in your remarks a little bit, but why is mentoring particularly important to women?
I said it, women are better together. We are rock stars. We can do this. We can do anything that we want to and that we propose to do, even if it takes 100 more years. But I'm telling you, we're gonna get there. you know? So one of the things that I want to say is that I choose to mentor. What do I mean by that? I don't wait for people to come to me sometimes and say, hey, can you help me with this or that? If I see potential in my crew, in my staff, I'm gonna mentor you, even if you don't want to, right? Because if I see potential, then why not? Why not develop? Why not uplift? Why not, bring it to the next level? So don't wait to say, well, I hope so-and-so asked me to. No, go for it. Go and ask her. Are you awesome? I want to work with you, and on the other side, do not wait to be discovered. I mean, if you think you have it, go for it. Reach out, and ask to be challenged and ask to be connected. We know how advising on connectors and connecting, how important that is for our own development. And lastly, when I'm mentoring and when I'm working with other mentors, I always tell people that there is no barrier, and there is no problem big enough that will go away. It's like the waves in the ocean. They come, I'll tell you what, they're gonna go, and they come and they're gonna go. So it's in keeping up that rhythm, that with success and sharing experience and challenge people to think different from us. Mentoring to me is not, let me tell you how I think, so you can just be a version of me, be different, think bigger. And also humbly, people were saying before, one of our panelists was saying, time limit, don't, we're not gonna be working forever or for 5 years, but at the same time, know when your protege or the woman that you're working with has outgrown you, and be happy about it, and that's when the mentee becomes the mentor, so that how you have been successful. So.
Thank you. Janice, if you were taking on a new mentee today, what is one of the top pieces of advice that you would give them as a mentor?
I think one of I'm going to say the top 3 things is always be open and ready for change. In the sense that I remember starting in my career, I thought I had it in place and what would happen and how it would happen. And of course, it didn't turn out that way. Roles change, rules change. Where I was at in my life, there were a lot of changes occurring at that time, but being open for change, being willing to kind of step outside of your comfort zone, meaning that sometimes we have a group of people that we are comfortable with, and then they start sharing or thinking the same way we are, but the world is passing us by. So when I think about my field, it's that everything is about evidence-based practices, what works. If there's no evidence or research behind it, it doesn't work. You may have something you want to do, but what the current trend is or what's really happening today, people are not going to buy into it. So being willing to research, being willing and able to accept positive feedback. I'd also say whenever you step out there, you have an idea, make sure that you've got everything on point in that. Being willing to ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? Is this really what I'm passionate about? Or is it just a makeshift thing that's going on in your life? The other thing is you got to get involved. No man is an island. So either get involved in the field or whatever you're really passionate about, and think about giving back to the community, because it's not all about you all the time. It's not all about you. So get connected, be open to receiving feedback. Ask yourself, is this really what I'm passionate about? And really think about getting involved in your field and also in the community. So for me, it was giving back, because when I think about where I am today, when I thought about it when I was in graduate school, I never thought I'd be sitting in this chair. My focus was on how can I continually help people. And it wasn't until I really got in and doing the work and finding out where those barriers were, what was preventing people, what was preventing women from being successful. As I managed a program, it was a program for chemically dependent pregnant women. So number one, there was bias because the women were chemically dependent. Number two, there was bias because they were chemically dependent and pregnant. And number three, chemically dependent and pregnant, and sometimes from lower socioeconomic levels. And having to deal with different systems and helping them work through it, and then working through courts and talking about, but these could be good moms. We need to wrap around these supports. But here's the positive thing of the whole thing, is that then a year or two later, going into a hospital and potentially seeing these moms working in various capacities, or going into banks or stores or other institutions, and they are not just merely surviving, they are thriving, and they are making a difference in our community. And that's why it's important. And so mentoring is about giving back, and it's about creating a better future for everyone.